Welcome to the Child Care Director's Chair, the podcast for bold educators who are ready to lead, grow, and shake things up in early childhood education. Whether you are a teacher eyeing that lead role, a lead stepping into leadership, or a center owner dreaming big, this is your space to grow with purpose and leave your mark. Hosted by heart-centered leadership coach Erica Sacoccio, each episode brings you real talk, actionable tools, and a contagious laugh or two, all designed to help you step into your next level with confidence. So pour your coffee, pop in those earbuds, and take your seat, because your leadership journey starts right now in the Child Care Director's Chair.
Hey guys, it's Erica with the Child Care Director's Chair podcast. I'm so excited you are here today. I have a question for you. What if the most effective early childhood classrooms aren't loyal to one philosophy, but they're intentionally designed for the children standing right in front of us? Today, we are diving into designing an eclectic curriculum, pulling the strongest elements from Reggio-inspired Montessori, forest schools, and more to create a learning experience that truly meets the cognitive, physical, and social and emotional needs of children. And I couldn't think of a better person to have this conversation with than Susan Zoll. She is a speaker, author, educator. She has worked with hundreds of teachers, really, across the country, creating intentional, meaningful classrooms that actually work. I do have to gush a little. She was my professor at Rick College for a little bit of time. And so we know each other on a personal level. So welcome to the show, Susan.
It is so wonderful to be here, Erica. And I just want to say again just how proud I am of you and all of your accomplishments. And I'm so excited for your conference that's coming up in May.
Yeah, I'm very excited too. And we're excited to have you there. Folks that are listening, as we talk a little bit today with Susan, you're going to be able to grab so many golden nuggets, but you're also going to definitely want to come see her in person. So for the folks who don't know you, tell them a little bit about, what you've been up to, what you do, who you are, and what you've been up to.
So like probably most of your listeners, I'm an educator. I'm a teacher. I actually started out as actually in my early days, I worked in a corporate early childhood setting, kindercare, while I was in college. And then I discovered Montessori education. Went on a field trip for a class I was taking at Endicott College. And when I went on to the field trip, what the professor was teaching, and she took us to her school, I'd never seen a Montessori classroom. And I just started picking up the materials and saying, "Oh, what does this do? What do you do with this?" And I was sold. I kept going to visit her, and she hired me as an assistant teacher without any Montessori training. And then I quickly began my training and have been in Montessori for a very long time. And during that time, working in Montessori schools in Massachusetts and in Georgia, we came back home, now living in Rhode Island. And when we came back to Rhode Island, there weren't very many Montessori programs. So I started working on a federal grant that was looking at early language and literacy development in Head Start classrooms, public school classrooms, community-based early childhood programs. And so that just has led to earning my PhD. Never saw that as happening. Working in higher education at Wheelock College and then at Rhode Island College, where you and I met. And now I've kind of gone back to my Montessori roots. And now I'm an author and a researcher. I've written 2 books that look at, since science of reading is such a big movement right now across the country, and more than 40 states have signed legislation around science of reading. The books align Montessori education with science of reading, so we can demonstrate that Montessori is related to reading research. And then I have a new book, and I'll put it up here. Oop, and I'm guessing we might have links, but the newest book will be coming out at the end of February, and they're all published by Teachers College Press. This one looks at Montessori education from birth through adolescence. So anyone who's just curious about what Montessori is, this book and the work that I'm doing now is kind of just trying to introduce Montessori education to those who do not yet know what that is. So there you go. There's about 30 plus years in 3 minutes or less.
I have to say too, when I did my field study, I was I had never been to a Montessori school, and I went to one in East Greenwich,
Yeah.
and it was so beautiful. And I was like so impressed. And I just enjoyed the whole experience. And I got to go 3 or 4 days and just kind of like just watch the teachers, the way they interacted with the children. But the coolest thing was in the it wasn't even dramatic play, but it was dramatic play furniture. But the kids were serving their own snack and then washing their cups and it was like real like glassware. And I was like, these were like 3 and 4 year olds watching real glassware. So I just thought it was the coolest experience. I could see why you were drawn to it. And I love too that we're talking a little bit about Maria Montessori and then also Reggio. And I always kind of make this joke and go, well, the best Italians know about early childhood education.
Exactly. And they were very strong movements. They actually grew out of, historically, both of these approaches to learning grew out of what happened after World War II. As Italy was trying to restructure itself, they made decisions that they wanted to create educational experiences that were very learner-centered, right? And both Reggio and Montessori, certainly Maria Montessori predates it by a couple of decades, but when it came back into fruition after World War II, they kind of have the same basis of being learner-centered, child-centered. And just to go back to what you experienced, so that's actually an area of the classroom where you saw the children using real glasses, real servingware, serving their own snack, not at a predetermined time that everybody has snack, but when a child is hungry, going to serve themselves snack. That area is called practical life. And it's a whole area, and the youngest children are really drawn to that. But if you think about what you saw children being attentive to multiple steps. You saw children serving themselves. So for the video portion of this, right, we have scooping, we have pouring, we might have tonging if there's something there like carrot sticks they might be picking out. This is all preparation of the hand, which is something that happens in that whole practical life area. It's all for preparing a child to hold a pencil for writing. So what we see are skills that are about independence, which they are. Its deeper purpose is preparation of the hand. I always knew when I was teaching in early childhood classrooms, I knew the children who had independence at home versus the children who had everything done for them. They were the child that would toss their coat on the floor for me to put it on them because they had no concept of how to put their coat on or how to zipper it, or would wait for permission to use something. So there's a lot that you can learn just by observing children, but I'm glad that you noted what was happening in that practical life area.
Yeah, that it was super interesting. And I think I was just looking at like, wow, look at how these children can just function without adults. I thought it was
Exactly.
So when we talk about eclectic curriculum, what does that really mean to you, Susan? And why do you think so many programs are exploring this approach?
So the session that we'll do, I've not done this session before, but it seems like a good place to bring people because we have so much that's in the news right now about Montessori education or about Reggio Emilia or about forest group schools, right? These up and coming approaches to learning that are happening across the countries and actually globally. So what could we say about each of those approaches and a few others that might be of help to people? And one of the pieces I want to hang on to, this is not necessarily about what is in popular culture. Rather, what are the approaches to learning that are actually beneficial to children and why? And is there research that supports this? So yes, we're going to talk about a homeschooling curriculum called Charlotte Mason so truth be known, I was also a homeschooling parent for a little while when we lived in the South, and I loved it. Everything I had given to other people's children, I could now give to my own child, and we used Montessori and we used Charlotte Mason. But what are the research pieces that we can bring to any of these approaches that we'll discuss in our session so that people can feel, so teachers and directors of programs can feel confident that what we're bringing to children is worthwhile, that it's evidence-based. It just can't be that it's a popular thing. what's the evidence that this actually supports children's development?
Yeah, I was just having a conversation with two teachers in my program yesterday. We were talking about curriculum because they were working on their lesson plan books. And I always go back and go, well, why are you doing that activity? Tell me more. And like, why are you asking that? And sometimes I'm like, it's so weird, Mr. Cross, because I want to know, like, is it intentional or did you see that on Pinterest?
That's right.
Or did you see it in a video on social media?
That's right.
I want you to be able to tell me, how does that benefit our kids?
That's
Like,
right.
all right, that's a good question, Miss Erica. All right, I'll go back and I'll get you the answer. So, because it's so, because we have so much access to so many things on the internet now, right? And social media and all, like you said, what's in fashion, what's the trend? I think it is important to go back to research and use what we know and our years of experience and in our teaching. So
And that's research too, right? So I always talk about research, a capital R, like the big $1 million projects. And I also talk about research, little r. What we do in our classrooms every day, that's research. We try something out. We observe, did it work with the child? Did it get the outcomes that we were hoping for? Yes or no? That's research with a little r. It's happening. That's action research in our classrooms. That's valid and reliable data that we can gather. So I don't want to ever negate that. What happens in classrooms and what teachers do, that's research also.
yeah. What about diverse learning styles and being developmentally appropriate, meeting those needs? Let's talk a little bit about that and why you need to have different methods and different ways that we approach things.
I think so. I'm going to relate this to my years of being in the classroom. When I would have parents who would say, I'm just not sure if Montessori is for my child. And I would always say back, and I believe this about any approach, I can only connect it to Montessori because that's predominantly what my teaching experience has been. I think that it's really important to always begin with a developmental approach. The materials that we're using are developmentally appropriate. Our objectives are aligned to early learning and development standards. Those milestones are there for a purpose. Now, will all children meet a particular milestone by a particular age? No, we have spans of time, right? And there might be different ways that we can approach things. So, you and I know each other. One of my big pushes around children's language and literacy development, right? I hold strongly to that. Well, there are many ways that we can do that. There could be a Montessori way. There are things that are, we build great language development using what are called 3-part cards. Maybe I'll bring some of those to the session to kind of show what this looks like. But in Reggio, it could be done through art experiences. Or through forest school, it could be from outdoor experiences. So we can still get to the same outcomes, but we can use different approaches. So we always want to begin, I know this is broken record. We always want to begin with the standards. We always want to begin with those developmental milestones because children might approach those at different rates. They might meet those objectives at different times. But we always want to be supporting them in their own movement forward, whatever that timeline is.
Yeah, I love that. Speaking of standards, they are very much embedded in my head. I was just working on the approval for CALP for the conference.
Yes.
And I had to run 45 workshop sessions through the standards to make sure everything was in alignment. So those are very much in my head. Not just one standard, NACE standard.
That's right.
The we don't use workforce anymore here. We use the whole leadership framework and then RILE. So yeah, I had to align it with three different.
I bow down to you for doing all of that.
I was like, this might possibly be the hardest thing about running the conference.
It is, I'm sure. I worked at the center for 6 months just before coming to Rick. I was co-director of professional development, so that was part of my task was to review all of those. So I understand what you're saying.
Yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot. So I love the aspects that you have shared earlier. Sometimes educators might say like, they are Reggio inspired or that we use some Montessori, and that can kind of feel vague. How can we intentionally weave approaches together instead of just like picking pieces?
Yeah, and I think we have to be careful about picking pieces. So that's something I'm going to have to be very conscious of as we're doing our session. I think I think probably one of the safest ways to do this. Well, there's a couple of things. One, as an educator, I'm going to have some pretty good knowledge about what these are, right? It can't be that I went to observe and I saw this thing and I put it in my classroom. It could be that I do that and I go back to that little R research. I could try it out in my class and it may work and it may not. If I could go back to that classroom and talk to the teacher and say, okay, I tried to put out snack in it and so that children could serve themselves individually. We used real glassware. A child broke the glass, or it dropped. It slipped out of their hands, or it seemed like the children weren't really taking turns very well. There's more that you need to know. It's more than just putting an activity on a shelf. We kind of have to understand the whole process, because it's more what you saw. You saw a lot of things that were in place. I kind of brought your attention to asking if you had seen the children's attention and all of the steps that were involved between serving themselves, their concentration in that. You saw them washing their dishes and finishing that up. That's a whole process for one activity. So it's not just putting something on your shelf. It's really understanding what that process is about.
Yeah. So I will tell the truth. When I came back from that school, I did pick my school apart a little bit, and I was like, my table doesn't look nice enough. I was very discouraged. I was like, all right, I want some fresh flowers on my table. Like, we had placemats, and I have a lovely school, but we had placemats, and it did make me rethink the aesthetics of like what my school looked like in comparison.
So let's stay on this for 1 second about the aesthetics, because I think we can connect aesthetics of classrooms to Reggio and to Montessori, which are two different types of aesthetics, right? Or play-based learning, totally different aesthetic to learning. So I think that one thing that happens as educators become more seasoned, I'm looking for a polite way of saying that, as we become more seasoned, I think we forget to go and visit schools. I think that this should be part of our own professional development. Can we, twice a year, once in the fall and once in the spring, can we go and visit a school, spend an hour or two observing, taking photos, not of children, but of environments, raising some questions with the people in the classroom, later on through emails, because we can learn from others, right? And this aesthetic is an important element. We are going to talk about environments. We are going to talk about, it's not just about what you put on the shelf. It's about talking about the whole aesthetic of your classroom, because then we have to talk about the process about what does that mean for children. So, and the processes we have to put in place so that the aesthetics remain in place. And how do we support that? So the environment is key. And what do we want in our environments? And I'll say one more thing that came to mind as you were talking. I think for anyone who wants to explore other philosophies of education, I think all that we can say is that we are inspired. Unless we absorb and are trained and take in the whole philosophy, we can't say that we're Montessori, we can't say that we're Reggio, but we could say that we're inspired by some things. I think that it's important for any educator, especially our younger or new to the field, to not feel that they have to do everything. Choose one thing. Okay, for the next couple of months, I am going to focus on whatever it is that they choose to do. And I might be inspired by something that I read in a book, or I might be inspired by a visit to a school. And I want to try to work this in. Don't try to do everything. It's just too much. If you want to be successful, it's kind of trial and error as you're inputting things.
Yeah. I think too, for the folks that are listening, maybe could we just go back? I want to just go back a little bit and just give a summary. Or I'll give you my summary. I'm not the expert. I'll give you my summary of what I think when I say Reggio. So like Reggio is child-led inquiry, environment as the third teacher. Those are the things that come to my mind. Is that correct? We good?
Yeah, and more art influenced as far as learning.
Influence. Okay. And definitely remember the beauty of the classroom, like taking care of everything, wiping things down, not having dust, like not having dust. Like these are the things I remember when I was, reading. And then so Montessori was a lot more on independence, a prepared environment, purposeful work. Is that?
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
Purposeful work. Things on the shelf are being used. If they're not, they're put away.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so talk to me a little bit about You said Mason?
Charlotte Mason. So it's a so Charlotte Mason is something that I learned when I was doing homeschooling. So when we lived in Georgia, in the county that we lived, it was the largest homeschooling group in the country. And I learned a lot while we lived there, and I was fascinated. So Charlotte Mason, the pieces that I took, so I was Charlotte Mason influenced, was a lot about writing. It was a lot about literature, fine literature. My daughter at that time was a first grader, and she memorized a poem. We learned about the person who wrote the poem. Part of what they do, it's all literature based. So let's say maybe your first grader wasn't quite a thorough reader yet, but you would read the book together and you would read a chapter. And part of what you do is you have the child state back what they, from memory, recall from the chapter. And then the adult is actually typing this up. I typed it. Some people handwrite their recollections. And then they read it back to the child, what the child remembered and what was scribed. And then they ask the child if there's more. Over time, the child is learning about characters in the book. They're learning about beginning, middle, and end of stories. And their recollection grows over time. So this is an oral tradition, literacy-based literature, fine literature connection that I still think is a very valid process.
Okay, so in my brain, I hear living book and narration and respect for children.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And forest schools, I know forest schools. I love forest schools. And they are all about risk taking and resilience and outdoor learning. We have so many friends in Maine that have forest schools. They're all over the place. But yeah, in Maine for sure. I met so many folks when I was over at the Maine AUIC conference back in October. And there were just so many cool educators there. It was probably one of the biggest conferences I've been to other than NAA. When I tell you there was a sea of educators coming out of those hallways and out of those classrooms, I don't know, it was over 500 people.
That's awesome. Well, when I was at the NAYC conference in December last year, I was surprised in the vendor area how many have now moved into whole displays just around outdoor learning, environmental learning. Yeah. Big push.
Yeah, that's so cool. What would you say one of the biggest benefits of an eclectic curriculum is in supporting a whole child?
It goes back to one of your earlier questions. I think that if we are doing something in our classrooms, whatever that philosophy is, and yet we're still not reaching the child for the outcomes that we're looking for, what else is it? It's not about what else the child needs to do. It really is a reflection of what do I, as the educator, need to do differently. So maybe there's something through another philosophy of education that might entice the child into the learning experience, or meet them at a place where we need to be moving towards, not asking the child to fit into our environment as we've structured it, but what can we kind of change to scaffold their learning? And what can we take maybe from another project that might work? So one thing that we didn't mention was Project Zero. It's actually a relationship with folks at Harvard University with Reggio Emilia that created Project Zero. And that is also there's a lot of projects that we could borrow from them. And in Providence, we actually worked with folks from Project Zero. Ben Mardell was a great influence, where everybody has a strength. So children were asked, tell us something that you're good at. And so it could be how to swing, how to tie your shoes, what's the best park to play at. And so the children would draw their pictures and they made little books, and they would either dictate or write as best they could what they knew. The then mayor of Providence, Mayor Tavares, he wrote How to Be a Mayor. And these books were all displayed at the Children's Museum. I mean, these are things that are replicable. It met children where their own interests were, and yet literacy and language development and community building and authentic family engagement happened from that one experience. So yeah, we can meet children where they are, and we can find other ways to do that.
So this is really, really interesting. I hope that the listeners that are tuned in today, especially those who are really around in the classroom, building curriculum, building those environments. I hope they really consider taking Susan's course, workshop, whatever you want to call it. You're going to have a great time. Susan, so before we wrap up, I want to talk a little bit about your newest book, right? And that's called Implementing the Montessori Method.
Mm-hmm. Learner-centered education from birth through adolescence. There are so many myths about Montessori education. And like any classroom, you can find a variety of what it means to be Montessori inspired. Where was somebody's training, or did they take training? Are they part of what's called MACD training? Are they accredited by a larger body like American Montessori Society, AMS? AMI is the international version. IMC. There are a host of organizations. This book, what we hope to do is to give a bird's eye view as to what Montessori education is. If you're a new parent and you're thinking about putting your child in a Montessori classroom, an infant toddler program, what would that look like for an infant toddler? What would it look like for a child between the ages of 3 and 6? What are multi-age classrooms? What does it look like at the elementary level, middle school, high school? They do exist across the country. And then we actually did a couple of other things. We did some surveys. We asked people who had attended Montessori schools, we said, what did you learn from it? Because there hadn't been research that had been done in this area. And it was really interesting to see, where did these young children end up in their lives? And did they think that Montessori education influenced them as learners, like as they went to college, or didn't? Or did Montessori education influence their work careers? And we had some very interesting responses. And then the other thing we did is we created something. Bronfenbrenner has something called an ecological system, right? We talk about the child at the center. I'm glad to see you're nodding. So I love Bronfenbrenner, right? Child at the center, and then the influence of the family, the classroom, the community, right? It kind of spirals out from there. We did that with Montessori education. And so we have a couple of new visuals we created them for the book, but are based on Bronfenbrenner to describe how Montessori education influences children's development over time. So we're really proud of that. And then we met with some people we observed in classrooms across the country. All of the chapters for each of those age groups begins with an observation of those classrooms. And then we met with teachers and people who have provided materials. There's this one gentleman who's from Canada, and he developed this, and it's called a hexavium. It's not been printed before. It's going to be in the book. And he designed this one visual that encapsulates all of the elementary curriculum. And so we're going to do, like you, I'm trying to learn from you, Erica, and we're going to do some videos with him. And some other folks, a gentleman who created an app, and it kind of keeps track of conversations more at the adolescent and older elementary level to see who's talking and who's saying what. But he has this app that kind of keeps track of conversations so that there's equity amongst the students. And they are the ones, it's not an adult telling them who's talking too much, but there's an app that kind of guides them so that they can say, ooh, we haven't heard from this person yet. I can see on the app you haven't said anything. And that gentleman, we're hoping that he might speak with us as too, but his work is in the book. So it's just, it's a good overview for folks who are not familiar with Montessori education.
Yeah. Well, I love how this conversation gives educators permission to stop chasing perfection and start building intentional experiences that truly serve children, their teams, and their communities. Susan, thank you so much for sharing your expertise with us and inspiring us to think bigger and bolder and more thoughtfully about curriculum design. As always, guys, thank you for tuning in to the Child Care Director's Chair podcast. As always, have a great day.
Thank you, Erica.
That's a wrap for this episode of the Child Care Director's Chair, where we believe leaders aren't born, they're grown. If something sparked for you today, share it, shout it out, or pass it along to the next bold changemaker in childcare. Don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and stay connected with Erica Sacosio for more real talk leadership tools and a whole lot of inspiration. Until next time, lead with heart, grow with fire, and always remember, the chair is yours. Now own it.